Here we go. Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Just want to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Priscilla Andrews. I am the clinical director here at the Cancer Wellness Center. So I oversee our clinical team and help direct our clinical programming here at the center. I also work with people through our counseling program with individuals and couples and do some of our educational programming. And one of my areas of interest for a long time now has been around motivation and behavior change and the process we go through in order to make something a habit by changing a habit. I worked a lot with people in post-treatment. One of the other programs I do is Treatments Done Now What? And I find that especially post-treatment, but sometimes even during treatment, cancer can end up being a fork in the road for people where they decide they want to change a behavior. They want to stop doing something, they want to start doing something, and that can be easy to talk about and sometimes feel challenging to implement. So I'm hoping that our program this week, and hopefully you'll join us again next week, it's a two-part program, will give you some ideas of if you're looking to change something, which I'm guessing everybody here is, to give you some ideas of how to be thinking about that and some approaches that you can take that will bolster the likelihood of you successfully doing something different in your life and making it stick, right? I don't know about you. I'm great the day after I go to the dentist with flossing my teeth. Don't talk to me a month later, 3 months later, 4 months later, right? Because it's hard. It's hard. Even when we know something would be good for us, it's hard for us to like actually start doing it and keep doing it. So hopefully this will give you some tips and tricks. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And hopefully everybody can see the screen now. Lisa, you can see it good? Well, can somebody who has their camera on give me a thumbs up? You can see my PowerPoint now. Thank you very much. Okay. And again, you're going to get a copy of this after, so no need to write furiously to take notes. Okay, so here's a few objectives that I have that I'm hoping you'll leave with today. Number one, I want to talk about the process by which change actually takes place. I think we can have some ideas about it, and I think when preconceived notions, and I think having some context of sort of the psychological process that in which change takes place can not only help normalize some of the experiences that you've been having, but can also guide some of the strategies that you take to increase the likelihood of being successful. Second, I want to talk about motivation and talk about what motivation is. And then finally, want to talk this week about some ways to intentionally increase your motivation, because there are things that you can do to put some gas in the tank to get you going and keep you going. The counterpart to this, what we'll talk about next week, is we'll talk about goals and goal setting and some structure and kind of concepts that you can use when you're thinking about implementing change so that the way in which you go about changing is going to bolster the likelihood of successfully doing something different and having it be built in a way that you can keep doing that thing. Okay, now you guys have your own objectives, right? So you want to think about like people typically don't come to a building motivation program if they're not wanting to change something, right? So just holding in mind as we enter into this space and this program together, like what your objective is, like what it is that you're hoping and wishing could be different. And you could see there might be different ways that you have of talking to yourself about that, right? Like maybe what you're saying is, I wish I could, or I hope I could. Maybe it's like, I want to. It could also be more firmly footed in saying, I'm planning to do this. Or maybe some of you are even coming in here with a goal of what you're going to do. So helpful to think about what it is that is pushing you, that is motivating you, right? All of you had some motivation to get you here, to be here. So, like I said, I want to talk about how we change. Now, the way we experience change may be like an on-off switch. One day we're doing one thing, and the next day we're doing something different, right? And the reality is that there is a lot of hidden process leading up to that switch being flipped. And it is a process that has been well researched. And there is this framework called the stages of change that can really be a map to understanding how change takes place and understand what is going on inside for us as we're moving towards doing something different. And as I mentioned, after we talk about the stages of change, I'm going to pair those up with things that you can do specific to the stage of change you find yourself in that can help move you to the next stage of change. So, first stage of change is pre-contemplation. Now, my guess is that nobody here is in pre-contemplation, at least not for the thing that motivated you to be here, because pre-contemplation is basically there's nothing to change. And it's characterized by the 4 R's: reluctance, rebellion, resignation, or rationalization, right? It's being in a place where I don't have to change. I tried to change and it didn't work. It's going to be okay because, right? Like if I give, you'll see there's some low hanging fruit. I often use tobacco cessation, dietary nutrition changes, and exercise as a lot of my examples. That doesn't mean that's why you need to be here. It's just easy concepts that people can kind of make a little mental map around, right? So pre-contemplation when it comes to smoking cessation, right, could be I tried to quit, it didn't work. I don't, the doctors don't know everything. I don't need to listen to them. It could be, I've smoked for 60 years and I'm fine, so I don't need to change anything that I'm doing, right? So pre-contemplation, again, guessing that's not where you guys are because maybe you identify more with contemplation. So in contemplation, it's this being in this space of I'm thinking about making a change. I think making a change could be good, but there's a but, right? Like there could be a lot of ambivalent feelings when you're in contemplation. There's still a real connection to the benefits of your current behavior. And I don't mean maybe that you're cognitively, mentally thinking about the benefits. That'll be something that's actually a helpful strategy to moving to preparation. But there is a psychological attachment to the benefits, right? I think I should start going to the gym, right? But I get home from work and I'm so tired and it's cold out. And I don't want to have to leave the house, right? I'm really connected to the benefit of staying home versus going to the gym after work. And so there's really this like consideration and contemplation of like what are the pros and cons of making that change. Then in preparation is I see the benefits of making a change and I'm taking the first steps by developing a plan of action, right? Maybe I'm researching gyms online. Maybe I went out and I've been looking online for new sneakers. Maybe I went and I bought myself some workout clothes, right? I'm getting ready to do the thing that I've been thinking about wanting to do. Now, in some theories of change, preparation and action, they actually just have action. I like preparation being pulled out, parsed out, because there can be this phase where we want to do something different, but we kind of got to get our ducks in the row. before we can actually like do the thing. And so including preparation, I think kind of helps to tease that apart, because action means I'm working on my goal, right? I'm in that place of a positive feedback loop. I've started going to the gym after work and I realize, boy, I feel better after I go to the gym. I feel better mentally. I've been feeling better physically already, right? I'm doing the thing. Maybe it's not a habit yet, but I've already started implementing aspects of what it is that I want to have as part of my life. And then maintenance is now we've moved to habit, right? The novel becomes the normal. You're more comfortable with that new behavior as a routine. You've taken some pride in that ability to change. It feels like more of the like home base than the previous behavior was. Now you'll notice that relapses in here because it's so common, right? We make a change and then we revert to our old behavior again, right? Especially like using that gym analogy or that gym example, that gym example, right? The weather's been cold, super cold, there was snow, right? Maybe I'd gotten to a really good rhythm where I go to the gym, on the weekend and oof, I didn't go this weekend. And it really, you can see it's just a cycle. That just means we're going back into pre-contemplation, contemplation. And I think it's important to normalize the fact that relapse is common and there are things that you can do in that stage to help you get back on that horse. You can see that I have in here a link that you will get when you get the uh, PowerPoint. I am also going to add it into the chat now if you're interested. That's a self-assessment that you can take, and you'll see in my PowerPoint, it gives you what your score would be and what it might indicate as far as what stage of change you're in. Okay. So let's talk about what you can do to build momentum to move from one stage to the next. And you'll see there's some overlap here. I will say with pre-contemplation, one of the things when people are in pre-contemplation is if a person can be open to learning more information about what they're currently doing and think about what that impact might be of not changing anything, right? Can somebody who is a smoker be even open to taking in some of that information about what are the long-term health effects, why it would matter, what difference it could make, even stopping smoking after 60 years or 40 years or whatever. Now you can see overlap here between what can help with pre-contemplation, but can also help with contemplation, right? We want to look at when we're in contemplation or pre-contemplation, we want to look at not only the pros and cons of making the change, because I think that's what we tend to look at is like, oh, these are the things that are going to be better if I do something different. But if that was enough, then when somebody said, oh, here are the good things about it, then we'd go ahead and do it, right? No, we want to understand what are the pros of the change and what are also the things that I'm going to like have to sacrifice or compromise on if I do things differently. And let's look at what we're doing now and think about what are the pros and cons of now. I always give this example because it's such a great example. I always had a person that attended this program years ago, and they were wanting to cook with more whole foods and do more meal planning themselves. And this person lived alone and ate a lot of convenience food, like bought a lot of like frozen meals or would stop at, get drive through the drive-through at McDonald's, right? Whatever the case may be. And so when we talked about like what are the pros of that, this person said like it's easy, it's quick, I don't have a lot of leftovers, right? So there were some things that we had to take into consideration. And so when they were coming into the preparation phase, knowing what the pros of their current behavior were and being able to look at that in a non-judgmental way, right? Oh, there's something wrong with me. I go to McDonald's all the time. I just eat frozen food all the time. But to move past that and say, here are the ways that it is helpful for me, allowed them to say they went and they bought themselves a cooking for one cookbook. They knew they wanted something easy. They went and bought themselves a crock pot, right? So they built into their plan as they were going to implement something, those things that might ease that transition because it took into consideration why that continued behavior was really difficult to let go of. The other thing that we can do is really actually spending time every day visualizing the changed behavior. Like, okay, when I am going to the gym, this is what it's going to look like, and this is how I'm going to feel, and this is what I'm going to be able to share with my family and friends, right? You really want to sit with that. If a couple minutes every day can really help with what your motivation level is, because you can start to embody that experience, that savor the experience, the anticipated experience of having that change implemented. And I will say that can be really helpful as well if there has been a relapse, if maybe some of what has brought you in here is something that you used to have as part of your routine and you've kind of fallen away from it, is getting into a place where you're really spending a couple minutes every day just allowing yourself to re-experience what it was like when that was a part of your life. I think something else is talking to people about what you're currently doing with your friends and family, talking about like, this is why I've had a hard time starting going to the gym. And here's, what I've noticed is, I'm not going to the gym because I'm really tired when I get out of work and I don't want to go. And it's hard for me to get up in the morning, but I notice like I feel really sluggish and I know I felt better about myself. I slept better, right? You really want to start externalizing. And because I think part of that is you having a chance to put words to and process whatever has been swirling in your head. And also sometimes it can elicit support. Sometimes it can be somebody who's kind of like an accountability partner. Sometimes it can result in having a buddy, somebody that's also trying to make the change that you're wanting to make. Now, when we move into preparation, that's when you're really in that place. When you want to move to action, that's where you want to come up and start making a specific plan for change. And as I mentioned, when we meet next week, we'll talk about, I'll give you a framework for how to do that. Where do I start? How do I create a plan? I'm really big on let's make a plan that is actually achievable. When somebody comes up with a plan when I'm working with them and then they come back and I say, how did it go? And they're like, I didn't do it. I'm like, they're going to go down probably some sort of negative self-talk shame spiral where I'm going to say, okay, it seems like that plan wasn't the right size plan. And we just need to come back and look at the plan and think about like, what is going to be the bite that is digestible, right? What do they say? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. That's what we're looking at here. And again, preparation, start talking about that plan with friends and family and ask for their help. Maybe you need their support. Maybe you need their practical support, right? Maybe, hey, I want to go to the gym in the evening. Like, I need to know, like, can you be in charge of dinner? Because I typically make dinner. And could I know that you're going to be in charge of dinner Monday, Wednesday, Friday? Because then I'll just go right to the gym from work. Maybe you're asking for help because you've got some experts. I am not a content expert when it comes to these behavior changes. I mean, some of them I am, right? You want to work on a relationship, you're wanting to change your stress management. But like you have a friend who knows a lot about nutrition. You have a friend who's done marathons before, is really into fitness, right? You have people in your life that have implemented the change that you want to make. Take advantage of those resources. And then finally, we want to, when you're in action, what you want to do, I used this term before, is you want a positive feedback loop. You want the information about the positive impact of what you're doing. You want it to be clearly shined back at you. You want to track your progress. You want to have some way of rewarding yourself. You want to practice that positive self-talk about what it is that you've already started doing. All of this is going to help you implement something as a habit. Um, the difference between action and maintenance is just the people in maintenance have more experience figuring out how to overcome potential obstacles and having solutions for that. When I go to the birthday party, if I'm trying to reduce my empty calorie intake, and I know I've got that birthday party coming up, and my friend is like the best baker in the world, and I know I'm going to want a piece of cake, the person in action phase who's just going to their first party may not be as equipped or experienced in as somebody in maintenance who's had to do that several times and has a plan of attack. I let myself have a bite. I make sure that I leave before the cake is served. I have a bite off of my friend's plate. I make sure that I have a glass of water, whatever it is. So when you're in action, if you want to move to maintenance, you want to start thinking about those things that are going to come up that are going to get in your way, because things are going to come up that are going to push against some of the things in your routine, right? We all get thrown off of our routine from time to time for various reasons. I mean, you all know that if you've been through a cancer diagnosis, that is like one of the primary things cancer does is throw you off your routine. So, and then as I said, with preparation, actively looking for a role model or a buddy can be really helpful when it comes to moving from action into maintenance. I'll pause for a second to see if anybody has any questions that they want to add to the chat or come off of mute for. Okay, so let's talk about implementing change here, right? We've got this formula. Implementing change requires three components. We need willpower, that gas in the tank. We need way power. We need to know, like, how are we going to get to where we want to go? What are we going to do? And then we need to know what our destination is, right? Where is it that we're headed to? What exactly are we trying to accomplish? And actually, these three components in psychological research, willpower plus way power for our goals, equates to hope. When we feel like we have gas in our tank to do the things we want to do, if we have clarity of what we're trying to work towards and we know how to get there, that tends to be that really gives us high levels of psychological hope, because we feel like we can do something. We can be an active participant in having the things in our life that we want to have in our life. So side benefit there, as we're talking about these things, as you start thinking about building your motivation, getting clearer about your goals, working to find ways to actually implement those changes, side benefit of that is not going to just be the change itself. It's also going to likely lead to you feeling more hopeful. So motivation. So let me go back and just say that if any one of these components is not adequately in place, that can make it difficult to implement change, right? Maybe some of you are here and you actually kind of feel like you have gas in the tank, but you kind of related to the idea of behavior change and you've been having a difficult time changing things. And maybe part of the issue you're struggling with is I set these really big goals for myself and I feel really motivated. And then I say, well, I'm going to eat healthier. And then I feel motivated, but I'm having difficulty translating that into like the right size bite to get me started. Maybe some of you have willpower, have a clarity of what you want to do. I'm not going to talk a lot about way power because each of you has different things that you're trying to accomplish, so needs a different content expert when it comes to that. But I do want to say, like, maybe you'll come out of this and say, I actually do feel like I know what I want to accomplish and have that gas in my tank. But I realize I'm really struggling with knowing how exactly to do that. But today we'll talk a little bit more. Oh, somebody just asked about way power. So way power is like, do I know what exercises to do if I want to start exercising more? Do I know what type of weights are appropriate for me? Do I know how long I should exercise? Do I know how to monitor my heart rate? Do I know what I can start with so I'm not going to get hurt? Um, like if it's a nutrition change, it could be I want to eat healthier, but like what does that mean? Like given where I'm eating, what I eat right now, like what should I start eating more of? What should I cut out? It can be very overwhelming to make these lifestyle changes and not really have a map to help you. You are welcome. Sounds like that answer helps. Um, so we're going to talk more today about motivation. And next time we'll talk more about that goal setting piece of it. So I want to tell a few stories around motivation and thinking about the notion, something that can be helpful is having like a motivation role model. And that can be either somebody who's made the change that you're wanting to change, the change that it somebody that that has either made the change you want to make or maybe is exhibiting the behavior that you want to have as part of your life. It could also be like a motivation role model, could also just be somebody like you really admire their ability to the motivation level that they have, right? So I'm going to give some examples here of of people who have shown a high degree of motivation. So you can feel free to answer in the chat who these different people are. So potential motivation role model number one, as a child, this chart-topping icon lost her mother when she was only 5 years old. After dropping out of college to pursue a career in dance, she moved to New York City where she was held up, attacked, and had her apartment broken into. This material girl worked and lost a variety of odd jobs to pay her rent, including a job at Dunkin' Donuts that she was fired from for accidentally squirting a customer with a jelly donut. This was all before recording her self-titled debut album, which included hits like Lucky Star, Borderline, and Holiday. That is right. 5 points Gryffindor because that was Madonna. Okay, second one. This American entrepreneur and illustrator was fired by a newspaper editor because, quote, he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. After that, he started a number of businesses that didn't last too long and ended up with bankruptcy and failure. He kept plugging away, however, and eventually found success as a pioneer in the American animation industry. That is right. It's Walt Disney. Anybody who's been to Disney World or Disneyland probably knew that from the logo. And then finally, this media mogul faced a hard road to get to that position. As a girl, she endured a rough and often abusive childhood. Early in her career, she faced numerous career setbacks, including being fired from her job as a television reporter because she was, quote, unfit for TV. After working as an evening news anchor, she was transferred to a daytime slot. Her show boosted a third-rate local talk show to the top spot and was expanded to a 1-hour format. That is a hometown favorite of Oprah. And I like to share these stories because you can see motivation. These people who are highly motivated hit bumps in the road. And I want to normalize that as you're trying to make changes, you too will likely hit bumps in the road. That is going to be more likely than not. And people who have high levels of hope, it's not Pollyanna-ish where they think everything's going to be fine. People with high levels of hope actually also show high levels of being able to anticipate challenges and problem solving how to overcome them. I'll also say, I think when we think about these stories, something that speaks to me is the grit that it can sometimes take to stay motivated for our goals, to accomplish our goals. Now, these people had higher goals than certainly I had in my lifetime, but certainly admirable to think about how people are able to overcome obstacles and still reach for what it is that they're wanting to achieve. So, what is motivation, right? Motivation is something that can encourage you to make a change. It gives us momentum. It kind of gives us that stick to itiveness, that perseverance. It's a desire to do something. Maybe it's that inner drive telling you to do something, right? It kind of comes from within. The technical definition is a conscious or unconscious drive inciting action, behavior, or goal. Goal. I feel like there's a word missing there. Huh, I never noticed that before. Right. So again, you can see there's different words that we can think of. Maybe you relate more to the notion of inspiration or driving force. Maybe you relate more to the sense of like having the will to move towards something. But when we think about motivation, I think one of the things that's really valuable to think about is what is that internal resource that can help move you. And you can think about one of the things that can be helpful is thinking about in the past when you were motivated to do something. Maybe it doesn't have to be about changing something, but when you were motivated to do something, to reflect on what was it inside of me? What was it that helped me do that thing, even though maybe I had to work at it, maybe I had to overcome obstacles, maybe I had to persevere, right? We may even be our own motivational buddy, if you will, by looking at our past self. The other thing that can be helpful too when it comes to motivation is sometimes we lack clarity ourselves of what we were exhibiting when we were really motivated. So if you found that there were times in your life where you felt more motivated, you can turn to the people in your life and say like, hey, like what did you notice about me, right? When I really changed my eating habits several years ago and I was like really like sticking to a healthier diet, limiting, my intake of salt and my intake of sugar, like what was it about me that you saw that you think helped me do that? Because that can sometimes get us back in the frame of mind because that's an experience we actually lived. It's not something we're straining for. It is really reminding our system of a state that we existed in. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second here because I want to share a different screen. Okay, so here's what I'd like us to talk about and build out together. And this is where I'm hoping, oops, what did I just do? I got to share a different screen. I am so sorry. All right. Can't have a Zoom without some technical difficulty. Okay, here we go. All right. What I want to invite some discussion around, and that can be through chat, or if you feel comfortable coming off, you can. What I'd like us to talk about is what do you find motivates you? What do you find when it could be something in the past? It could be something you've noticed for yourself now. What do you find helps put gas in your tank to either get you going or keep you going?
For me, it's the benefit I'm going to receive,
Can
the
you say
results.
the benefit?
The
So it's
benefits, or somebody put in the chat results. So the results that I know or benefit, same thing to me that I'm gonna receive.
great. So it's having a sense of once I start doing this, I know this is why it's gonna be good for me. Okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, let's see. Oh, they're coming in here. Thank you very much for that. Somebody said helping others. Just working on some formatting here. Seeing results. So there's like what can be motivating is like knowing that what you're doing is making a difference. An accountability partner. Somebody else said working together. Food and treats. Now you probably noticed by now that I've started two different lists here. And part of that is because we can have things that motivate us that are intrinsic, and we can have things that motivate us that are extrinsic, right? So some of it is what we get from outside of us, right? So like I will add to this and say, praise can be something that motivates us. Money can motivate us. We can also say, oh, so I have some other ones coming in. So positive self-talk, the prospect of feeling better. I like that. Being an I can girl. I love that. But you can see that some of the things that can motivate us come from inside, right? I have a sense of progress. I feel better. I see that there's a difference. What motivates me is I'm talking to myself. I'm my own cheerleader, right? I'm gonna feel better if I do this. Now there's also like I put the food and treats in both, because it's you know what I'm gonna say is that is an example of a reward, right? And sometimes just like praise is a reward, money is a reward. Um, and that can be something we give ourselves. Sometimes rewards come from other people though, right? Certainly I love my job. I love what I do. And the fact that this is my job and I get a paycheck certainly motivates me, right? Um, that idea of an accountability partner, right? It's something that is outside of us that is sort of putting the gas in our tank. Um, Somebody said getting together with friends. So there is this social aspect of what can be motivating to us. Now, what can also be motivating to us is um, like other people's, I'm adding this, other people's feelings and attitudes towards or about us, right? So, we don't want to make somebody angry. We want to make somebody happy. We don't want to disappoint somebody. We want people to think positively of us, right? Those are all like I don't want to come off in any way as those being negative things, right? Because that is an important thing to recognize, right? Are you somebody who tends to look outside of yourself to kind of have your motivation reflected back at you? Or are you somebody who has sort of a well inside of you that you can draw on that can help drive you forward? If you notice that you relate more to the extrinsic motivators than intrinsic motivators, you find that you kind of need that coxswain, in this rowing, there's like the person that's at the head of the boat and they're like, stroke, stroke, stroke. They're keeping the whole team going, right? If you find you need that person that is going to drive you to keep going, one, let's capitalize on that, right? If you relate to that, you're that person, you're going to need that accountability partner. You're really going to benefit from bringing people in from your friends and family to help move you forward, right? You're going to benefit from having that change buddy. The other thing too, I would say is if you relate to that extrinsic motivators, is to spend some time thinking about your own internal motivation, what are some of the things that you can find that might motivate you. And I'm going to introduce this today, but we'll talk a lot about it next week, which is thinking about values and what's important to you. Because when we connect change with what is important to us, our like underlying values, things like our relationship with our family, our relationship with our partner, our spiritual life, our professional life, our civic engagement, our physical well-being, right? These are all things we can have values around. And when we get in touch with that, that can also bolster our intrinsic motivation level and the things that can intrinsically motivate us. So stay tuned for more on that. Bottom line is having things in both intrinsic motivators and extrinsic motivators is valuable, helpful to have extrinsic motivators balanced out by identifying some intrinsic things as well. Now, to go along with this, let me see. Of course, my text box disappeared. Okay. What hurts motivation? What do you find it kind of takes the wind out of your sails? Maybe you even had that experience recently. Maybe you're here because you tried making some changes on your own, and for whatever reason, it either you weren't able to get started, or maybe you started. Naysayers. Yep. Right? People who, that could be the category of people who they question why you want to make the change. They maybe they're using humor to talk about you making the change, but it kind of has a negative impact. I think there's also the aspect, and this kind of goes hand in hand with the naysayers. I think there's also like people who either don't want you to change or are not willing to be a part of the change, right? I want to eat healthier, but my partner loves chips and cake. And no matter how many times I say, I really want to reduce that, they come and show up with donuts every weekend. Um, uh, um, negative self-talk, right? Yeah, that is a big one, right? I always say, um, we talk to ourselves in a way that we would never tolerate somebody talking to a child that we love, a child we care about, right? If you think about some of the things that you say to yourself in your head, and now imagine, I'm guessing most people here at some point had a younger child in their life, whether it was your own child or a niece or nephew or a good friend's child. And now imagine saying the things you say to yourself to that kid, right? And probably what I would guess is most of you, because I do it too, would go, ouch. And I'd get real defensive on behalf of that child. So if you notice that you have that tendency towards negative self-talk, I want you to take a moment and envision that child that's important to you. And now imagine saying it to that kid. Can be a helpful way to disrupt that tendency. Somebody said comparison, right? Social comparison is a really big thing, right? Are we comparing ourselves? Are we feeling like we're always falling short, right? We're not going to the gym enough. We're not eating healthier enough. We're not making the change fast enough. Like the shoulds, right? If you find you're doing that, can be really challenging to stay centered on where you're at and what is achievable for you now. Certainly feeling overwhelmed, not seeing change fast enough. I don't know if everybody's seeing this in the chat, but right, these are all things that can hurt motivation. And the reason that it's valuable, right? These are the obstacles. These are the speed bumps, right? If the goal right now is just to build motivation, what we're really talking about is these are the speed bumps I might encounter, because then the question becomes, okay, if these are the things that get in the way of my goal of increasing my motivation, now that I've named that, what do I want to do, right? If I'm not seeing change fast enough, okay, maybe what I need to do is I need to come up with a more achievable goal, or I need to break my goal down to a week by week goal so that I can actually see that what I'm doing is making a difference. The other thing that I will, somebody said time, right? There's never enough of it. One of the things I also like to highlight here too is after a cancer diagnosis, people that there's a natural drive to want to get back to where things were before the diagnosis, or be back to where things were before you went through what you had to go through. And what I basically say is, like, what you're doing then is you're putting your goal on the top of a mountain, and now you're climbing that mountain. And so everything is in relation to looking up and how much further you have to go. And it's really not about looking at the progress that you've made from where you were. So I always recommend, if you notice that your comparison point is, I want to get back to where I was, what I will suggest is inverting that. And now what we want to do is we want to look down the mountain and say, what was my worst day ever? Right? What was my most stressed day? What was my most physically compromised day, right? Whatever it is, the worst. And that's your point of comparison, because now you're going to be in a better position to be able to see the progress that you're making. Because especially if you're trying to make a big change in your lifestyle, like, that's going to take time, right? Rome was not built in a day, as the saying goes. Some other things that are coming through is money can hurt motivation, like not having enough to act, not being able to access resources. And certainly one of the challenges is certainly energy fatigue. And I think that's where, when we talk about goal setting, these are going to be some of the things that you'll want to think about. Like, between now and next week, think about the things that get in the way of motivation, right? That's one thing. And the other thing is, think about the benefits of how things currently are, because when we start thinking about goal setting, we want to take those things into account. Okay, so let's talk about, just kind of pull this together, and let's talk about things that you can do. You can do as soon as you get out of here to build motivation, right? One, visualize the change. Visualize making the change, visualize what it's going to be like once the change is in place. You want to think about, how am I going to feel physically? How am I going to feel mentally? Even if it is not a physical thing that you're wanting to change, our body gives us lots of important information, right? So how you're physically going to feel afterwards might just be, I'm going to feel less tense, right? I'm going to feel less overwhelmed. I'm going to feel energized, right? But thinking about how am I going to feel mentally, emotionally, where's my headspace going to be, fantasizing about being successful and sharing that with others. Talk to people every day about what it is you want to change. Doesn't have to be the same person, it can, but find a way to bring it up in conversation every day with somebody. Another thing that you can do is what is it that you have in your corner? People, things, inner resources, skills, personal qualities that are going to help you do what it is that you want to have in your life, help you implement that. And then also think about what are some potential roadblocks and what can I do when those pop up? Not even if, right? We're going to just assume there's going to be speed bumps, there's going to be roadblocks. What do I want to do if that happens? So that when it does happen, I don't have to feel completely without any sort of solutions, and then I'm going to get demoralized and I'm going to fall into relapse and feel like, well, see, now I can't do it. Because one of the things that typically comes up if I go back to what hurts motivation is like a sense of failure, right? I tried and it didn't work. That can be very demotivating. Okay, so just key takeaways here before I open it up. I know we're at the end of the hour, so can appreciate that some of you may need to hop off. If you want to stay for the Q&A, I'll stick around for like 5 to 10 minutes. Key takeaways, right? You can intentionally build motivation by focusing on things that motivate us. This was not an exhaustive list that we came up with, right? Think about the things that motivate you and think about what can I do to put those things into place. I'm a person who extrinsic motivators are big. How do I start coming up with a reward system for myself? How do I find that person who's going to be the accountability partner, right? Also, knowing what hurts motivation allows us to plan for roadblocks. Right? What are the things that have maybe sapped your motivation? That's why you're here. Can you slow down and think about those so that you can be mindful of that as we head into goal setting, as you think about taking that into consideration while also shining a light on the things that do motivate you. I did not get into this today because of time, but I would also suggest just reflecting, we'll talk about this the next time, is what is important to you? Why is the change that you want to make important to you? Right? It must be important or you wouldn't be here. So really slowing down and saying, why is it that I want to eat healthier? Why is it that I want to exercise more? Why is it that I want to be less stressed? And we'll talk more about a framework to give some organization to that the next time we meet. So I want to say have a good afternoon and hope to see you next week. Plan to see you next week. I'll be your accountability partner for this one. But I want to give people a chance to hop off if they have some place to go, but also if you would have some questions for me for today's presentation, feel free to stay on and come off mute